Welcome, everyone, to Helen Keller Services' 5th annual NDEAM webinar. I'm Joe Malillo, National Employment and Business Relations Specialist with Helen Keller National Center. First, I just want to do some brief housekeeping. The interpreters and captionists are available, as you could probably see from the screen, and the interpreters will be pinned. If you have any issues, please write them in the chat box. You can write your questions in the Q&A as the panel moves along, and or after the session, or both. And we'll have the Q&A after the panel for about a half hour or so. So again, thanks for joining us. You know, we're all experiencing, both personally and professionally, the accelerating pace of new and accessible technologies. An owner that I spoke with recently said, technology is the great equalizer for persons with disabilities. The multi-talented and dedicated teams at Helen Keller Services for the Blind and Helen Keller National Center are committed to being on the wave of the technologies to enhance the opportunities for individuals who are blind, deafblind, and have low vision to thrive at work and live an enriched life. Our CEO, Sue Rosinski, is leading us on that wave, and I want to introduce her now. Take it away, Sue.
This is Sue. I want to thank you, Joe. Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here with you today. I'm Sue Rosinski. My name sign is S on the chest. I'm a white female. I have shoulder-length blonde hair. I'm wearing a blue dress and a blue jacket, and there's a black background behind me. So it's really my honor and genuine pleasure to welcome everyone at this kickoff for this exciting event. As Joe said, our 5th annual National Disability Employment Awareness Month webinar. And the theme for this year for NDEAM, which was chosen by the U.S. Department of Labor of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, is access to good jobs for all. And aligned with this theme is the title of this year's webinar.
I'm sorry, this is Wendy speaking. Sue, would you be able to turn on your video so I can spotlight you, please?
My video is on, Wendy?
It shows, one second. It shows it's off.
Wendy, this is Marilyn speaking. She's on my screen. I have it on gallery view. It looks like we have two Susan Rosinskis on here. So if you go up to the one that has Susan and then a space Rosinski, she's there.
So you have a double.
Well, I think I'm going to let the other one go.
Okay. Now you're pinned. Thank you.
I think I'm visible now, right?
You're good.
All right. So hello again. So what I wanted to share was that our theme for this webinar is full steam ahead. And so we've chosen to focus on the dynamic opportunities for careers in this exciting field of STEAM that you've been hearing so much about, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. In today's job market, these disciplines hold the key to many successful quality jobs with high earning potential, careers that are also high in demand in this age of AI and technology. So at HKS, we're committed to offering vocational training and opportunities that will result in quality employment opportunities. And our central mission for individuals who are blind, deafblind, and have low vision is really to have access to these good jobs and these careers that are really commensurate with the person's abilities and their interests and their aspirations. Our daily efforts are really to engage youth and adults to develop those skills so that they can compete in this global economy and in these emerging industries. And the STEAM field itself holds so much promise for that growth in so many different occupations. Today, we're so happy to have with us such an impressive panel of experts who are ready to share their experience and perspectives on how the STEAM industry, this sector, has tremendous career potential and opportunities for people with disabilities, especially individuals who are blind, deafblind, and have low vision. And we're committed to elevating and expanding what training we offer to include more exposure to these skills and training in the STEAM industries. We also value very much our partnerships and the teamwork among educators, among business, vocational rehab, and we just look forward to the future where we will continue to establish new collaborations. I just want to take a moment and thank our NDEAM team at Helen Keller Services. We've had a group working on this webinar for some time. Joe Malillo for his leadership, and Marilyn Trader, Liz Mead, Wendy Chouinard, Matt Salivary, and Brian Ward, really making this event a meaningful one and supporting that collective vision that we all hold, that people with disabilities can live, work, and thrive in their community of choice. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Gus Chalkias, who is our Program Director of Assistive Technology Services at Helen Keller Services for the Blind, and he will be our panel moderator. And just a little bit about Gus. He has over 20 years of experience working in our fields, and he began his focus on assistive technology back in 2001, working at the Computer Center at Baruch College for visually impaired people. And during the course of his career, he's developed numerous programs, training, both for people who are at a pre-vocational place or those that are really ready and soon being employed. The programs proliferate under Gus's leadership, and he teaches now a course that is at NYU through the Ability Project, which he also created and developed. And he teaches at Hunter College as well. Since 2019, he's also teaching an assistive technology course there to teachers of the visually impaired. He's on the advisory board at the Hunter College Rehab Counseling Program. And I just want to say his creativity and his leadership has made a true difference to the offerings that we have at Helen Keller Services for the Blind in our adaptive technology training program. And I just want to thank Gus for his strong contributions and his support of our mission. So now I'm going to say, take it away, Gus.
Thank you so much, Sue. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your kind words. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I hope I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation today about STEAM and pathways to STEAM careers and individual journeys to STEAM careers, right? So we have 4 really wonderful panelists. I'm super excited to hear from them. So I'm going to introduce them and not talk as much as possible, because for those of you who know me, you know how much I love to talk, and especially to talk about myself, but I'm going to stop doing that today. So let me start with Chancey Fleet. She's a blind tech educator revolutionizing accessibility at the New York Public Library. Her Dimensions project explores state-of-the-art 3D printing for accessible images and data. She's a library journal mover and shaker. And she is reimagining digital inclusivity. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about what her journey was like. Thank you. Welcome, Chancey, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Next up, we have Dr. Sarah Coleman, who is reshaping STEAM education for those with sensory disabilities. From teacher to deafblind advocate, Sarah chairs the Iowa Commission for the Blind. Her research opens doors for underrepresented populations in STEM. Welcome, Dr. Coleman.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to the conversation.
Damn, looking forward to hearing from you. There's, like I said, I'm super excited to hear from each of you guys today. Okay, well, next we have Aaron Graham, who is a software engineer, excuse me, innovating in accessibility and tech. With Usher syndrome, Aaron brings unique perspective to his work. He's a seasoned Python developer and is passionate about inclusive technology. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you.
And finally, somebody I have the privilege of working with day in and day out, Joe De Niro, who is the Assistant Program Director of Assistive Tech at Helen Keller Services for the Blind. Joe empowers blind and visually impaired individuals with cutting-edge technology skills. He's also ensuring digital accessibility, working with UsableNet as a tester for accessibility, and works with us doing that in that capacity as well. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
Nice to have you with us. So thank you all for being here with us today. I'm going to start with a very simple question. I'm going to ask for each participant, for each panelist, to share about their personal experiences. So the first question basically is, tell us about your journey. What brought you to this this presentation, this webinar today, but also what brought you to your current vocation as a STEAM inside of the STEAM field? And whoever would like to go first, please do.
This is Chancey. I can start. So I've been in the assistive technology field for about the same amount of time as you have, Gus. I started in college working part-time with VR clients who wanted to learn their tech. There was a really innovative program in Virginia that paired VR clients with tech expertise with other VR clients who needed tech expertise. And that was a really unconventional but fruitful on-road. So the first thing I'll say to our audience is that if you can build bridges like that, non-traditional pathways for people to break in, that's so powerful. That's why I'm here today. So I've been teaching assistive tech and working in assistive tech for a pretty long time now. But if you had told me back then that I would be identifying as a STEAM professional these days, I would have been absolutely shocked. I grew up with, if nothing else, an antipathy towards science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And in retrospect, that's because I didn't have access to the tactile graphics, the raised line drawings, and the other supports I would need to excel in those fields. And so because I had an easier time in things like English, I thought that those were the fields I was interested in and that those were easy for me. It's been a really amazing experience for me to grow in my role and start meeting colleagues who are blind and low vision, who are doing science, technology, engineering, coding, arts every day. And I got propelled into the place that I am now in the field by connecting with those people, learning everything I could from them, and then having this desire to get those skills for myself and to figure out how to get those skills to the library patrons that I serve and support. I'll be telling you more about my work later today, but basically I help blind and low vision folks access hard to get information like tactile maps, diagrams, data representations, and 3D prints of objects. And I teach library patrons how to be not only the consumers, but the producers and creators and imaginers of those kinds of things. And so I'm really excited to be part of this field and part of this presentation.
Actually, Chancey, since you brought it up, before we move on to the next panelist, can you tell us a little bit about the Dimensions program? Because I think it's a really incredible program that you've created. I mean, the library offers so many diverse programs and trainings and workshops and support groups and stuff like that you've really spearheaded, and it's been really amazing to watch those programs grow. But in particular, would you tell us a little bit about how the Dimensions project came about and how the 3D printing conversation began for you and then extended beyond that to your patrons?
So
Hey, Chancey.
Yes.
This is Marilyn. Before we go ahead, let's go ahead and do an interpreter switch. Okay.
Got it.
And I'll tell you when we're ready. We have Angela on the screen right now. She is pinned. Chauncey, you're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
So I was sneaky and put our library's web address right there by my name in the participant list. So you'll see talkingbooks.nypl.org to learn about all the programs that Gus alluded to, including our technology workshops, which are free, often virtual, and open to everybody. But the Dimensions Lab is a place where blind and low vision and sighted people can come together to make spatial information more accessible. It is my conviction that blind and low vision people, currently, most of us live in a state of avoidable image poverty. We don't get tons of images from an early age. We don't take it for granted that when we show up at a conference venue, we'll be able to check out a map. We don't get holiday cards with pictures on them. When we're in a science class, we don't always get the diagrams that we need to understand the content. And many of us are spatial learners and thinkers, and many of us have the potential to contribute really meaningfully when we engage with spatial information, but only if we can literally get our hands on it. What the Dimensions Lab does is creates a situation where blind, low vision people and our sighted allies can access the means of production. So Braille embossers that make graphics, swell form and thermoform technologies, and 3D printing. Our lab equipment is curated so it's as accessible as possible. And our pedagogy includes what to do when a piece of the workflow is inaccessible and how we work around it. We have built a community of practice that believes in the capacity of blind people to understand and create images, and believes more broadly in the capacity of blind people to succeed and excel with non-visual approaches. We support museums and cultural institutions that want to make tactiles on a low budget or no budget. We support students and families. We support adults who want to explore their world through spatial information. And we are open 6 days a week by appointment with all of the equipment and one-on-one support and group workshops that anybody needs to become engaged in the world of making tactile graphics, otherwise known as raised line drawings, so that spatial information is available to everybody.
Thank you, Chauncey. Awesome. We're going to come back and revisit some of those things because there's some really great stuff. Let's move on to hearing from everybody else. Like, what brought you here today, and what brought you to your current position or your current work in STEAM? Don't make me call on you.
Okay.
I'm just being silly.
I'll speak a little bit more about my journey. I too have Usher 2A. So I started with being identified hard of hearing as a kindergartner, first grader, having hearing aids. And really that didn't impact my life as much or at all. But for whatever reason, I like science and I liked problems. I liked tearing things apart. I liked all of those things. And as I went through my education, I didn't realize how much my hearing affected my social. So I dove into books. I was into projects and Girl Scouts and those types of things because I had to find what I could hang on to as a hard of hearing person. And then I just liked the science, so I just kept doing it. And really, my school was minimum as far as accommodations. I could pretty much do everything that was required. I got a biology degree, and then I fell into education and became a high school science teacher and did that work for 32 years. But when I hit my 40s, that was when I was diagnosed with Usher. My vision was deteriorating, and it's progressive. And so I kind of hit a wall in relation to the sensory piece. So I kind of look at it as STEM kind of saved me because I had all of my education background. I started a doctorate program and completed that work. And my dissertation was in women with disabilities in STEM careers. So trying to figure out the women that had jobs, what helped make them successful. And a lot of the things that you mentioned already are the pieces that made them successful. They had access. They had parents that supported whatever they wanted to do. And I'm trying to take that kind of ideas of what those pieces are and how can we give those to people like me who transition later in life into maybe I don't want to be in the classroom anymore, but I can still contribute. And so now I've kind of tried to reinvent myself as a STEM advocate. And I work mostly one-on-one. And I also am very involved at the state of Iowa in relation to accessibility for STEM for Iowa students. And that's where I'm trying to spend my time in relation to what's going on. I will mention accessible technology. Technology is awesome, but if you don't have the attitude to use it, it's not going to help. So I come to this conversation very much as a new user of accessible technology, and I think that gives me an insight for others who are trying to figure that piece of the world out in relation to STEM and those programs. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I love what you just said about the attitude being such an important part. It really is. Like as we move through, you know, learning, right? Learning, there has to be a hunger for learning in order for somebody to learn. Like they have to want it. And I really do appreciate you saying that. Can you tell us a little bit about the research that you do?
The dissertation work really was surrounded with mobility and sensory disabilities. I decided to go across disabilities because I figured the themes would be stronger if disparate disabilities came up with the same themes. And the research really focused on, ended up focusing on the importance of family, the importance of the school. I'll just speak to one piece that I thought was really interesting about the research. All of my participants could point to not only one person, but one moment in their life where that STEM piece came in, where that calculus teacher said, yeah, it might take them more time to do it, but they can do it. Oh, I can do calculus. And that sent them down that path. Another one could remember that moment, it was an opposite moment, was, oh, you're blind, you can only water flowers. That's going to be your job for the rest of your life. And she basically said, heck no, that's not happening. So it's those pieces that I thought was really interesting, as well as how do you make sure you have the accommodations you need? How do you advocate? Because these women were in colleges basically in the early to middle 2000s and still struggling for their accommodations. So those were some of the findings within that research that helps inform how can we help people with disabilities achieve whatever dream they want to.
Do you feel that there is a difference between women with disabilities and men with disabilities in the STEAM field?
That
just
I
curious
can't
because
speak.
you're
Yeah.
okay.
My very quick answer to that is I really can't speak to that in specific.
Okay.
In general, it is more difficult in some sense for men to have a disability in a STEM field because STEM is still very masculine and still very male-dominated field. And so there are just some of that cultural man pieces of those things that can impact. But I think a lot of the findings would be relevant to both genders.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. I think this is a really interesting subject for all of us to really think about, like what are the pieces that, and I love that the idea of the moment that inspired somebody to move into a STEM or STEAM rather field. Thank you so much. I guess since you guys are not super forthcoming about volunteering yourselves, let's just go in order of the way that I introduced you. So Aaron, would you go next and tell us a little bit about your journey and what had you be here today? And not just be here today, but be in your field. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Just want to make sure. Okay, great. Well, I will first say that this has nothing to do with about not being forthcoming. I'm just very, very impressed with what the other panelists say. And I will give a fair warning. I don't have the depth that some of the other panelists do with their experience. So I'll just say what I've got here. I really love what everybody has said. I think one thing that we all think about is that technology is the great equalizer. And that was really relevant to me in me coming into this field and industry. So it really started for me in 2010 when Apple introduced the iPad. I was a freshman in high school at that time. I was really struggling with a lot of mental health issues and even more so with social issues. I, like Sarah, have Usher syndrome, but I have type 3, and I had a much worse prognosis with the vision at first. And in addition to that, suffering from hearing loss. So in the high school setting, fitting in with different people, having conversations, it was just so hard. I felt like I spent so much time by myself because I just could not hear or see what was going on. And at the time, I didn't know why. And I was very fortunate that I had a friend who I was very close with too. I went to his house almost every day after school, and we watched at the time the Apple keynote where they introduced the iPad and the iPhone 4. And I was just so like, it was a sensation that I will hold on to the rest of my life, because as someone who has partial vision and hearing, like the big bold letters as they were introducing the new products and the new features, the silence before a big announcement, it captivated me in a way that nothing else had. And everybody who was also into it in the audience and my friend and whatever else, like it felt like I was on the same level playing field for once. Never had that when I was showing up to school every day. And it was so incredible. We watched all the other Apple keynotes dating back to the 90s because it was just such a great experience for me. We even went on to make an iPhone app, which, to tie it back to something that Sarah said, you know, when you're developing software, a lot of times it's not just a quick answer like it is in school when you're taking tests and are on a timer. You take the time to think. And as people with disabilities, like that's where we thrive, when we are given that extra time and we use our creative power. So I'll leave it at that, but that's really what leapfrogged me into this field. And as I went on, yes, there are a lot more challenges, but as we'll talk about later in the conversation, a lot of learning and just one obstacle at a time and just keeping it moving forward.
So one, I guess you could say that the Apple event was your one moment that kind of like triggered something for you, or that launched you into this area, right? Just like going back to what Sarah said before. I love that.
100%. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Welcome. And last but not least, Mr. De Niro, Joe.
I don't have anything like everybody else.
Before you continue, I want to actually speak to something that Aaron said. Everybody's experience is valid and important, and it adds to everybody that you share it with. Okay, so Joe.
So how I got to where I am, my interest in computers started 42 years ago. I'm super dating myself right now, but I grew up in New York City, and in the 9th grade, and my middle school was one of the fortunate few middle schools at the time to get a grant, and we got 30 Tandy TRS-80 computers, and with that, we were able to do a year of learning the basic programming language, and I was hooked from that point forward. I didn't get my own computer for probably another 10 years, but I worked in the hotel industry for nearly 10 years. I was recruited by a hotel software company. I ran my own internet business in the early 90s. Not in the early 90s, in the late 90s, including teaching myself how to do HTML and actually develop my own website. I was diagnosed around the mid 90s with retinitis pigmentosa. And that was right around the time that I started my online business. And at the time, for a lot of reasons, I eventually shut that business down and went and decided to be, well, not decided, I had children and became Mr. Mom for many, many years. But then in the mid 2000s, I always knew I wanted to go back to work and pursue higher education. So I went back to school for computer science. And in the mid 2000s, it was funny because when vocational rehab was talking to me about it, they were like, well, there's not really anybody else that's really done this as a blind user. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be the first one then, and take that on. So I pursued a degree in computer science, and then my youngest daughter was born, and that kind of sidetracked that for a while. But one of the things that stood out for me during that computer science pursuit was one of my professors sat down with me once, and he's like, well, what do you want to do and in this field? And I said, I want to help people. Ultimately, when I go back to work, I want to do two things. I want to be able to do something that I'm passionate about, that I really love, and I want to be able to help people. So fast forward to about 10 years ago, when my youngest daughter was in school, and it was I decided that I didn't want to try to finish out my degree. I wanted to just try to get back into the workforce. And there were two things that I looked at. One thing had nothing to do with technology. It had to be, my other passion is fitness. So I thought about pursuing getting a certification in being a personal fitness trainer. And the other thing is what I do now with Helen Keller, and that's to be an assistive technology instructor professional. So that's how I kind of got into my role in Helen Keller. My other role, where I'm the head of digital accessibility testing at UsableNet, that's sort of happenstance. One day when I was working, I got within the span of like an hour and a half, 4 different emails, including from Gus, an email about an opportunity at UsableNet. And I looked up to the sky and I said, I got the message. I should probably apply for this job. And so I pursued that job. It was just as an accessibility tester, and I've been in that role now 6.5 years now. And I tell people all the time that I have the wonderful pleasure of I get paid every week, and I make a difference every week. In my role in Helen Keller, it's on a more one-on-one individual basis. And with my role with UsableNet, the work that I do has more of a global impact, and that's why I do what I do.
And this is Marilyn speaking. Thank you, Gus. Before we go ahead,
Yeah.
two things. One is that just to remind everybody that the chat box is disabled. So please utilize the Q&A for any questions or comments you would like to have. And because somebody was messaging me about the chat box. So, and then let's go ahead and do an interpreter switch. Let's go ahead and bring Kirk up. Kirk is on the screen. Thank you, Angela. Okay, we're good, Gus. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Joe, your timing was clearly perfect, right?
Yep.
So thank you all thank you for joining us and for sharing yourselves and your journeys with us. Can you tell us a little bit about like what challenges you've faced, or what challenges people who are pursuing a STEAM based career might expect to face and to deal with, right? So it's not just facing the challenges, but actually dealing with and moving beyond them.
Should I start? This is Chancey.
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
So I see the challenges that I've experienced and that I frequently observe other folks experiencing kind of break down into 2 buckets.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is all about bias. So of course, there are some deeply rooted cultural beliefs around disability and blindness and low vision that can cause otherwise good people to softly or firmly discourage or deny us from pursuing opportunities. Sometimes it's little things, like not receiving a document in an accessible format. Sometimes it's big things like being told that you shouldn't pursue a certain degree or certification. And there's absolutely nothing that we can do about the bias of others directly, but we can set ourselves up in a good place to respond to bias when we find it in constructive and proactive and self-protective ways. What I find really helpful is always being mindful that no matter what happens, my community believes in me and my community is around me, and I am there for my community in that same way. Maybe I had a horrible interview, but I know that I have people in the blind community who can strategize with me and help me with next steps. When I'm not sure how to respond to something, or when I just need to vent so that I don't say the wrong thing and lose myself an opportunity, my community is there for me in that regard. The other big bucket of issues that I contend with on a daily basis is just digital accessibility. Technology can be a great equalizer if accessible technology was purchased and procured, but let's be real. The world is full of inaccessible touchscreens all over consumer and office technology. There are lots of platforms, software platforms that could be made fully accessible, non-visually accessible, that aren't. And so before you can do your passion, before you can do a job, you've got to figure out every digital accessibility barrier that's in your way, and you need to find a workaround for each one. If you're smart about it, the answer is the same as my first answer. It's your community. You're networking with other blind or deafblind or disabled folks. You know who to talk to in your network who might have an answer. You have a time-tested retinue of strategies that you can use. So for example, you might use a visual interpreter to get past an inaccessible touchscreen. You learn from your community how to speak the language of developers and designers. It's not effective to complain, hey, this e-learning platform's inaccessible, but it is effective to say, this e-learning platform has undescribed images, buttons that can't be reached from the keyboard, and it doesn't have heading structure. That way, you're not just saying, here's what's wrong. You're letting folks know how to fix it. And you learn that from your community. And if you're smart and if you're kind, when you come up with a workaround, you are ready to share it back with the broader community. We are all stronger together, and I really believe that as a library worker, but also just as an activist in the blindness and disability space. I would not have the mental energy to do this all by myself. I would be super discouraged working in one of the most impenetrable fields traditionally, literally graphic design for someone who can't see traditional graphics. The way that I get up and do it happily every day, despite the imperfection of the tools that we have, is because of good people that I found in my community of support.
And there's new tools coming out every day or every hour at this point, right? Like just recently, you showed me a multi-line braille display that was able to show like gradation, a great gradation of grayscale so that it can like color shading and do different kinds of textures and stuff like that. And I think that the more technology like that's developed, I think there's so many opportunities and so much that's going to be made available. But I do agree with you. Community is everything, right? So just from what you said, the things to kind of keep an eye on, no pun intended, self-esteem or confidence, right? Community, and also just ensuring an advocacy, right? Just ensuring that the material that you're getting, you're requesting it in an accessible format, just making sure that it's being given to you in a way that you can interact with it. But it also sounds like somebody like you, Chancey, doesn't let that stop them, right? So you figure out ways to, whether it's using the context that you have within your community or the technology that you have at your disposal to access that information in your own way. But yes, I
Yeah,
love it.
that's right. One of
Fantastic.
my best friends, who's a lot less cynical than me, and sometimes just lifts me up, likes to say accessibility is like jazz. It's all about improvisation and landing on the right notes and making it work, even when you don't have a known or perfect structure. And that's the way that I look at it. And those new technologies that are emerging are becoming part of that jazz.
Yeah.
Although there are new impediments every day, yes, there are new
course.
possibilities every day, including with those new refreshable tactile displays.
That jazz analogy is fire. I love it. Who else? Share with us, please, your challenges or what challenges you think people entering this field might face. Thank you, Chansey.
Are you calling on somebody or did I just miss that?
Oh, no, I didn't call on anybody. I just was thanking
Oh, okay.
Chansey for her contribution. And if you'd like to go next, Sarah, please, by all means.
I can't add a heck of a lot to what was just said because it really does identify so many. So I think I would just add, when I think about barriers, especially since in my neck of the woods, this is about information and getting to information, is oh, I'm so sorry, that's not accessible. I'll get something to you tomorrow. It's very difficult. So don't get discouraged. But the other thing I just would add very quickly is this idea of expect and honoring change. And that is something I think employers and scientists and engineers and artists, everyone wants people who are able to do that. And that's why our population is really a great population to be hiring from, because we know change and have a variety of strategies to deal, cope, whatever word you care to use for that.
Adapt, right? And adaptability is so important. But it's just being able to shift or to pivot is super important. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Aaron or Joe?
Hey, yeah, this is Aaron. I think we probably can go in order. It does make it a little bit easier because I'm always worried about like speaking on top of somebody. So this is a good order. Yeah. So it's honestly hearing the other answers. I honestly feel, I'm gonna say it, like I feel kind of prehistoric with my experiences because when I first got into the workforce in 2017, I was straight up told by several people, do not share your disability, hide it at all expenses. And if you think about what everybody's saying now, that is like caveman mentality compared to where we are as a community. So I'm really glad that we're far from that. I'm glad that I've moved past that. If I can be very specific about one big challenge that's been really difficult from day one. So when I'm doing my own work on my computer, I was able to right away just make everything bigger. I moved the monitor closer to me, but I struggled right away when somebody else is sharing information with me as opposed to me working by myself. I remember at my first job, my first assignment was given to me. It was like a projector and we were sitting at a table and it was being shown up ahead. I didn't see anything and I had no advocacy skills to be able to say something about it. And I struggled with that, during the in-office times and then during the pandemic when people were sharing their screens as opposed to being in the same place. Other people, they have 4K screens with text in all different places, a mouse cursor that I can't even see. So I was missing a lot of information. And in fact, my performance suffered greatly from that. And I didn't know what to do. And with the help of like the other panelists have been talking about, with the help of the community, I got the strength in order to really say something and say, hey, like in order for me to be successful, I need the other people, you guys, to make things in an accessible format when you're sharing information with me. On my own computer, some of the things I do is I make the text larger, I make the mouse cursor larger, and I like a black background with white text. And when others are sharing their screen, I say, hey, temporarily, can you do the same thing just while you're sharing it with me? Then after we're done screen sharing, you can go back to whatever it is. And most people are very receptive to that, you know, like there really aren't any people who are against wanting me to get the information I need in order to do my assignment for them. So it's worked out really well. It's just a real matter of speaking up, saying something, and the word we use, advocacy.
Advocacy is such a big part of our day-to-day, and I'm going to say unfortunately, because advocacy has never been one of the things that I've super been interested in as an individual. I know how important it is, so I always have to train myself to advocate for things and to speak to things, but really deep down, I think a lot of us have been discouraged in the past to speak up, right? About speaking up, about asking for things. And I think maybe where my hesitation comes is from that historically, right? Does that make sense? But advocacy is such an important thing, whether it's self-advocacy or community-based advocacy. I think it's such an important part of our lives. And I pray for the day when we don't have to, right? Joe,
And-
did you want to?
Gus, this is
Yes.
Marilyn speaking.
Please. Oh, yep, switch. Yep.
You got it. Let's go
Perfect.
ahead and do an interpreter
Yep.
switch. And Angela's up on the screen. And we're good. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Gus.
Thank you. Joe?
For me, I think Chancey really touched on the two things that I was going to talk about was biases and accessibility. But when I work with transition students, so we're talking about the challenges, but how do we get past those challenges? We just talked about advocacy. One of the things I do with my transition students, since I was went to college as someone who was visually impaired, I try to share what I experienced and what I did to work around it. And advocacy is so important. Being proactive is so important, because a lot of those challenges that we had, certainly on the accessibility side, I had so many challenges with trying to. It's a little bit different now with digital textbooks, but at the time, trying to get accessible textbooks in a digital format was a bit of a challenge. So I stress to all my students, you have to advocate for yourself. When you walk into the disability services office of your university, they should know your name, because they knew mine. That means you're in there, on a regular basis where they know you. I teach them to be proactive. Contact you as soon as you register for your classes. Go to those professors that you're going to have classes with in the next semester, and go to their office hours now. Get that book information. Get everything that you need to know. Tell them what you need. That way, when you walk in on day one, you're at least walking in the door, armed for bear as much as you possibly can be.
I hear you mentioned transition, right? Transition age, young people. And one of the things that I've observed over the last, 20 plus years that I've been working in this field is sometimes there's an apathy towards STEAM and technology, unless it's like really cool, like the Apple iPhone, right? Like the iPhone is cool, so I'm going to use the iPhone, and I want a Mac because it's cool and it looks sexy and stuff, right? But I've also noticed that there's a lot of resistance to using technology, especially for productivity, especially for learning. Do you guys have any suggestions or any thoughts on how we might deal with that, or how we might combat that?
This is Joe.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times the students are not really just receiving the training that they should be in the school system. How many times they're getting. I had a student 2 years ago. the first day, you're doing screen reader 101. So it's, how do you get to the desktop? How do you do first letter navigation? How do you create a folder? Just some basic file management. And the student just looked at me and said, I'm using this tomorrow. Why didn't my TVI teach me this?
Mm.
And, I don't have an answer for that, but, they literally put it into use the very next day. So I don't know how, how much, so I don't know if they're being exposed across the board to adequate training for them, and that may feed the apathy.
I can get that. Anyone who knows me knows that my kind of like slogan for my life is options, right? It's all about having options. And it's, as a blind person, when I first lost my vision in the early 2000s, there were not a lot of options. Right? I couldn't get the phone that I wanted. I couldn't get the computer that I wanted. I couldn't get the, not that I wanted, but that there were specific devices that worked for me only. And now I can go into a store and pick up pretty much, like, I can go and pick up a television and it's going to probably have some accessibility features, or there's more likelihood of it, right? So just in more recent years, we have, I believe, more options. I think there's still a tremendous amount of ground to take, but sometimes I don't think our young people are presented with all the options that are available to them, and then they don't know which option to choose. I don't know. What do you guys, again, what do you guys think of that, like of young people? How can we get them more interested in this field?
This is Chansey.
Yeah.
This is something that really frustrated me when I was earlier in my career, and I didn't really understand where resistance was coming from. But what I've noticed over the years is that I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to resist learning about something that would be helpful to me. Resistance is coming from a place. Maybe somebody has been subtly told or made to feel that they are just not good at something.
Yeah.
Maybe they've been expected to jump in and use something, and as was just said, they haven't been given any instruction before that time. Maybe it turns out that they don't really have a good note-taking method yet because they've lost their vision and nobody has straight up said, hey, you need a way to refer back to this information. And so they're feeling nervous that they're not going to remember everything. There's a lot of legitimate reasons why someone might be showing up with resistance. And I think if you are the person learning, having some self-compassion and also some mindfulness about what you're feeling and why, and what you would need to feel differently, and then communicating that. If you are a counselor, having some compassion and also helping the individual understand what they might need to scaffold their skills, and thinking really about what learning tools they're going to be engaging with as they learn. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think resistance is your mind telling you that there's something you need that you don't have.
And it's coming from somewhere, right? Like it's not, like I appreciate you saying that, because you're right. Nobody wakes up today and actively says, I'm going to resist. Well, maybe some people do, but not around learning, right? And I think we need to encourage learning and encourage positive, like, reinforcement, positive encouragement, so that way our young people can start moving into, again, having options and being able to make informed and empowered choices for themselves. Sarah or Aaron, would you like to, is there anything that you might want to add to this conversation, or to, about, because I think we're almost about to start the Q&A session, so I think we have a couple of minutes before we switch over to that.
Yeah, I can add something. This was more what we were thinking about with advice and challenges and whatnot. So, and we're thinking about where the resistance comes from. I can give a really great answer for that. Especially in my last job, I've really experienced a lot of the people I worked with, the team members and the managers who did not have a disability in the same way that I do. They don't have the same level of communication and like social interaction skills that, for example, all these people on the panel have. So when we were talking about advocacy, I think there's just many levels to advocacy that we didn't mention before, which is that if I'm working with somebody on this panel and I'm advocating about what I need in order to be successful, yes, that does take some skill from me, but the other panelists, as we've heard, are very receptive and understanding people. So it's a lot easier to advocate for that. At my last job, I joined my first meeting. Nobody has their video camera on. There is no introduction, no ability for me to say who I am, what I need. So I had to fight tooth and nail in order to get what I need. Nothing was given to me. And that's the challenge in a lot of these, especially engineering science positions, is that, a lot of the people who you work with, they're incredibly smart, but they don't necessarily have the communication skills. So advocating for yourself is just 100 times harder. And
but we should also mention that because of there's probably lack of exposure, right? It's not just lack of communication skills, but it's also lack of exposure with people with disabilities. So that's another level or another layer of advocacy that we're charged with, right? Is basically advocating like, hey, people like me can do work like this. Sorry, Aaron, I interrupted you. Please continue.
I would agree with what you just said, but I also would disagree in the sense that I've met so many people who are not familiar with disability, not familiar with blindness, deafness, but they know how to ask. They know how to empathize. They know how to ask. And to me, it's not about familiarity with the disability. It's about, do you have communication skills in order to empathize and sympathize and work with other people who go through different challenges than you do, regardless of how much you know about exactly what they have.
Very fair. And it goes back to what Chancey said before about compassion, right? Just, having compassionate listening, compassionate communication.
This is Chancey.
Yeah,
I just want to add one quick.
Please.
Hearing what you're
Mhm.
saying and having once upon a time been in a job that fit like a glove on the wrong hand, in moments where you're experiencing a lot of frustrating communication and not having your advocacy land right and not getting resourced, the thing that got me through until I could apply for a job that I adore was going and doing volunteer work in a disability-led space. That did two things. One, it built up my confidence because it put me in a space where I had the things that I needed and I could feel what that felt like and observe my own capacity. And two, that surrounded me with people that knew what was a disability issue and what wasn't, and could give me the feedback about, hey, when you're presenting yourself, you need to change some of these tonal things and you've gotta improve these organizational practices. And because it was coming from fellow disabled people and because we were peers together and not in a supervisory relationship, I think I learned a lot in those spaces that I might not even have been ready to hear at work.
This is Sarah. I'm just going to add a couple of things. I'm a science person, love numbers, love data, and I know this is not true for all. And when we look at specifically blindness and visual impairment, but an interesting data point is that the unemployment rate for blind people in this country is floating around 65 to 70%. Of that 30% that are employed, 66, 2/3 use Braille on the job daily. And 90% can read and write in Braille. And I bring up that point because that goes back to that training piece and that goes back to access. And if we know these literacy pieces, these communication pieces are critical, that's something that I would offer, that sometimes a blind child is patted on the head. Well, you can just listen to the book, you'll be fine. But there's deeper education issues when thinking about those types of communication. So I throw that out as an interesting thing when we're looking for how do we get people, or people like me, who I've had a career, I'm in my 50s, I still want to work, making that transition. And I have included Braille as part of my personal learning to help with that access. So that's one thing I wanted to say. The second, that idea of low expectations, we don't even know when we do that. If that as you say, that flippant comment of just saying, you don't really need math, you'll be fine without it, or we're not going to put you in Algebra 2, which is the doorway to STEM education, is for girls, calculus in high school, for boys, Algebra 2 in high school. That is a major doorway into those fields. And if you don't have access to those classes, that shuts a lot of doors that are much, much harder to open. And my last point, I just was thinking about the job piece and, you know, the interviewing, and I happen to be a Star Trek fan, and I love Patrick Stewart. And Patrick Stewart was talking about when you audition for a part, and I'm saying like audition for a job. When you audition for a part, and you're so nervous, oh my gosh, you know, am I going to get this part? Am I going to do it right? And you walk in, he's like, you need to remember, they want you to be good. They want to be done with this process. They want you to be the one. And sometimes we get so hung up into our own, I'm so afraid, the advocacy, do I disclose, and all of these pieces, we forget the other side is we want you to be good. It was just something I thought I would add as a flavor of the things that we're talking about.
I think that is a great way to end this part of the afternoon and go into our Q&A section. Thank you. I'll kind of sum up later as soon as we are ending, but just thank you all for your contributions today. This has been really, really wonderful and informative.
So this is Marilyn speaking, Gus.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do an interpreter switch.
Sure. And then we
Kirk
can
is
start
on the
taking
screen.
questions. Yeah.
Hold on one second.
Of course.
Okay, Kirk is up.
Hey Gus, this is Sarah. Can I add one more statistic?
Please.
Because I love them.
Absolutely, please.
All right. When I was preparing for this panel, one of the things I got into was the labor statistics. There are approximately 11 million STEM/STEAM positions in the United States. And the average salary is about $101,000. So almost 102,000 is the average for those 11 million positions. Everybody else, 48,000 is the average. So if you're looking at that population. But this one I did not know, and I was very floored by this, is in those 11 million, 50% have less than a BA degree and are working in that STEM field. And for disability, people with disabilities, 65% of those folks have less than a BA. So that's a misconception I think a lot of people have just about STEM in general, but STEM does not require a master's degree, a PhD. There are a lot of STEM technicians that have a certificate or a technician's degree. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we're looking at what does it mean for somebody to be in this field? What does it mean for somebody to be working within this field? Because there's so many options. And that also goes to, then we have to look at, do they have access? Do they have a drafts program they can use? Do they have all of these things? And I think that's part of the conversation that we need in relation to how does that individual, how do we build this deaf, blind, or blind individual so that they can take advantage of those opportunities? And some of the skills we're talking about is certainly a piece of that puzzle.
This is
Right.
Wendy speaking. We do have 3 comments, questions that I would like to present to the panel, guys.
Please, yeah.
One is from Laura Clark. She says, I have found working with transition age students that we need to consider the whole person and other possible disabilities that may impact their motivation and participation. Also, COVID really hit my students hard and many experienced depression and further isolation. Any thoughts on that?
Anybody from the panel, please?
This is Sarah. I think one comment I would make is COVID may have affected the disability population even more, but it's affected the entire population. It's affected education, it's affected teachers, it's affected expectations. And I think, oh, they took the question off. And I do think the mental health component is something that just, when you're looking at the whole person, is making sure that they have those supports. And I think that goes back to our conversation about find your people, get your support, get that group. And I think that's important. And the answers to the COVID, we're still figuring that out in my mind.
Oh yeah, we're going to be feeling that for years to come, I'm sure.
This
Especially with our young people. Sorry.
This is Chancey. One of the things that I have found helps me connect with patrons that are presenting as less engaged or less motivated is I think that I'm more successful when I am led by an individual's interests. And I know that that's not feasible every single time. But somebody, for instance, just to give a real basic example, somebody who just will not practice voiceover. And so they come every week for 2 months and we're going to go over the same 10 gestures because they will not practice voiceover. Again, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, today I will be my own enemy. I think if you can present them with something that is more fun than the learning is annoying, if you can present them with like, oh, you need to learn how to deal with spatial layouts on your iPhone. So I'm going to give you a crossword or chess. Maybe somebody's really motivated by music. Maybe somebody's really motivated by photography. Whatever it is that engages that person, if you can provide instructional content that relays the things that you need them to know in a way that they want to receive it and practice it, it really helps.
Love that strategic thinking.
We do have another comment in the Q&A. First is I'm in DFW, and my husband was in the technical field for over 30 years, and we struggled finding in-person spaces to learn Braille. Please share. I do have to go to another job, but please mention the answer so it can be saved in the recording. Thank you for this event. And this is information that we can send over to Kaylin Tolbert later today. Another question is from Almeza. It says, first of all, I manage quote unquote interpreter and operator services at Wentworth Douglas Hospital, a Mass General Brigham subsidiary. The Interpreter Services Department oversees compliance to ADA. Is there a better title we could give our department that would better represent what we do and shows that we do not just provide services for patients who are limited English proficiency?
This is Chancey. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I can weigh in on these briefly. I've seen access services used as like a catch-all for communication, translation, and accessibility. In regard to the Braille, these are not in-person resources, but they're great. One of them is the Hadley Institute at hadley.edu. They will send you Braille in the mail and audio lessons to go with it. And there's also a ton of different publications and webinars and study groups and all kinds of good stuff from the Brailleist Foundation. I don't have their web address in my head, but if you do a web search for the Brailleist Foundation, you will find them. They're an international organization. It's volunteer-led, lots of great information to be had. And I wish you luck on your journey, and, you know, please don't give up, just stay with it.
I have something that I want to add, and I think this will be a question for Sarah because she is the statistics person of the panel. So I've really thought a lot about how much interaction and engagement really contributes to individual success. And I've noticed so much over my career that a lot of it is intangibles that you can't directly measure right away, but end up helping in situations where you won't necessarily be able to point back to, oh, it was because of my conversation with that person or working with that person that helped me here. But I know that working together digitally and also like in person as well with hybrid settings really does have a lot of benefits. And I was wondering from Sarah, do you have any statistics about like success with hybrid or in-office settings, or even like collaboration versus the easy way of just, oh, do it yourself type of thing?
You know, that's a fantastic question. This is Sarah. I don't personally know that, but I do know in my own research, you kind of touched on this. Organizations might say they're inclusive, and organizations might even have that word in their mission statement, but just because it's in a binder somewhere doesn't mean it actually happens. And what I've found in the research that I've dug into in the literature, a lot of that is what you're talking about are my work peers supporting me, sometimes from moment to moment, where I can't get XYZ to work, specifically because of my disability. I can't get something to work that I need. You know, hey, I just need a hand with this, or I need some eyeballs just really quick. And that's kind of how I do my accommodations for those short little moments. And so when you think about those relationships, I have to have the relationships with my peers for those types of things to happen naturally and easily. Just because, and the same thing happens when they can't figure something out with their computer, and I'm like, hey, just hit the Alt-R, you'll be fine. You know, I can help in my own way, and they figure out what I'm good at, and they know, okay, this is what you might have help with. So that intangible piece, that qualitative part of just being a human being in a work environment, I'll tell you what, Aaron, I'll do some digging and I'll see if I can find something for you, because there's tons of COVID research out there right now trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, businesses are trying to figure out, do we get more productivity by bringing people in the office or leaving them out in their homes? The guts say bring them to the office, but the answer might actually be keep them in their homes. So.
And this is Wendy. We do have a few more questions. We have about 7 more. Gus, is it okay if I read the question?
Please.
The next one is, what can employment specialists ask or do to delve into possible STEM job goal options for job seekers? And then there's another it ties in sort of with that. Can you please also talk a little bit more about action steps for self-advocacy?
And this is Marilyn. Before we go ahead, as everybody's thinking, whose hand's going to go up first? Let's go ahead and do an interpreter switch. Angela's up on the screen. Thank you, Kirk. Okay, we're good. Go ahead.
This is Sarah. I'll just, as far as STEM employment, sometimes it's just the basics. It's the basics of, I actually wrote this down, but of course I can't find my notes now, but it's the basics of, I need to be able to navigate. as a blind and deafblind person. I got to be able to get around. I need to be able to take care of myself. I need to be able to access information. I need to understand the specifics. So say I want to be an astronomer and that's a STEM field, then I need to be able to, how am I going to access data? How am I going to learn the math that I need to learn? Because I'm going to have to be in high-level physics. So those are some of the things to think about in relation to what you might need. I throw out a quick example. There's some really cool astrophysics going on right now where they sonify and they create, it's done by sounds. So they'll get data from some star that's far, far, far away, and the data will sound, forgive my voice, but it'll sound like, goes up high, and then that tells you what the shape of the graph is. And you can use that as a blind person to figure out other things going on within the system. And I mean, I'm fairly sure that most people on this call might have not even known that existed.
Mm-mm.
So that's a piece of where you need to get into. I'm going to do a shout out for 2 conferences. One is called an Island Conference, and they're running that next September 18th and 19th, I believe. And I can't remember what the letters mean off the top of my
Lara,
head.
can you spell that so that everybody can look it up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Island, ISLAND.
Oh, island. Okay. I didn't hear the D at the end and I was like, okay, maybe it's a word I don't recognize. Sorry.
No worry. And I'll try to put that out before we get off the call. And then there's Sci Access. And the Island Conference is a really good conference for people who are interested in helping people with STEM, because those are the professors, that's the researchers, that's the program showing you how that you can help people get access to, and they're also real scientists. They're blind scientists, they're deaf-blind scientists, they're deaf scientists. Sci Access is a little bit more education oriented, but the networking that occurs there is amazing. And you find out about those programs that you just don't hear about. North Dakota has a great little STEM program going on with students that could be copied, but nobody knows about it. So those are some of the things I just think about in relation to getting kids and getting people excited about STEM. And Gus, to use you as an example, you know, you're an assistive technology person, but you could easily slide into a STEM career if you get into data scientists and data analysis. So what would you need? And really, it would just be, I just need to know what that is, and if that's something I want to do. And sometimes that's all it is.
Yeah, I always I used to work with a youth program doing pre-vocational and having vocational conversations with the kids, and they would often ask me, well, what can blind people do? And I said, what do you mean? Like what kind of work? All right, what kind of work is available to me as a blind person? And I said, well, what areas of interest do you have? I was like, I think, you can probably find something in any area of interest, right? Like I didn't want to make any general statements, but where are your interests? But there's a preconception that only certain types of jobs are available, only certain types of research can be done by people with vision loss and combined hearing and vision loss, and it's frustrating sometimes to just kind of hear that messaging, and I know it's still out there. I know it's still out there, and it's getting less loud, but it's still pretty loud.
just quick. This is Sarah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Because one thing, I had this conversation actually with a blind teenager. You know, I've always wanted to be a truck driver. And I'm like, well, I don't think that one's gonna go. I don't think you're gonna be able to be a truck driver. But have you ever thought that maybe, well, and that's, you know, that's fine. There's lots of people who are not blind that ought not to be truck drivers.
This is very true.
But have you thought of, you know, if you're really into that, could you own a company? Could you own a couple trucks? And he was like, oh, wait a minute. He could still be around trucks and still be doing trucks because he wants trucks. He's actually starting to work on a business degree to start his own little trucking firm.
Love that.
There you go.
Love
Bend
that.
your dream.
Yes, it's Chancey. Can I address the action steps for advocacy?
By all means, please. Yes.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot that a good science communicator and a good disability communicator have in common. So when we're advocating, just like when we're describing a scientific concept, we want to be really clear. We don't want to say, hey, your class is inaccessible to me. We want to say, I'm unable to access printed handouts and PowerPoints, so I'm going to need them emailed to me, something like that, that's clear and specific and narrows it down. We want to provide documentation so that folks can learn more and that we're not directly responsible for all of that learning taking place. So if I tell someone that they need to fix the semantic structure in a document according to Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, I'm going to drop that link and I'm going to send them a couple other resources with some fun videos and easy ways to learn about WCAG. That way it's off my plate and they've got something they can work with rather than just me saying something's wrong. And at the end of a good communication, people should feel, the recipient of your communication should feel that they can identify positive next steps that they can take. So in my example, they know that they can add some semantic structure to their document with headings, and they know that I'll be pleased with that development. And I've laid out kind of a roadmap for them. And that kind of takes a lot of the uncertainty and anxiety and awkwardness away on their end. You want to put people in a mental space where they are primed and have everything that they need to help you get your advocacy request addressed.
So it's focusing on solution rather than just stating that there's a problem, right? It doesn't mean you have to have the solution, but just being solution focused, I think, makes a huge difference in how information is communicated and how information is received, right? So even to the person that you're maybe complaining to about lack of accessibility, if you're framing it the way you just framed it, there's like, oh wow, here's an opportunity to learn, here's an opportunity to make it different and to probably improve my work.
Exactly.
Yeah, and instead of just being like, this website sucks. Okay, great, thanks, that's really helpful. You know, like it's not helpful, or it's not meaningful feedback, right? It may be accurate, but it may not, but it's not meaningful. So we want to make the communications as meaningful as possible, so that and then inside of those communications, create partnership with the people we're communicating with, right? So that's what advocacy is. It's not necessarily about telling people what they're thinking or doing wrong. It's about creating partnership inside of a specific dialogue or a conversation, right? So it's, and for those, again, for people who know me, partnership is just a huge Thing in my world, but it's also, I think, in the world at large. If we don't create partnership, if we don't create community, then we really are by ourselves, and that's just never fun. Just never fun.
And this is Aaron. To add on top of the action plans for self-advocacy, I had a situation in my previous job where I was having trouble with the advocacy component, and I ended up creating a meeting with myself, my manager, and some HR representatives at the company. And we did come up with very good strategies, and it was helpful, but I didn't feel the best at the end of the meeting because I was worried about how well those solutions would sustain over time. And that was something that I wish I did better on and finding how to make it sustainable in that moment and at that time. And what I learned later on was that it was so valuable to connect with people outside of my team who did have the better communication skills, like I was talking about earlier. And it wasn't, and this is something that I think people worry about at work. Like, we're always worried about like bothering people who are busy. And we're always worried that like when we reach out to somebody, there always has to be a problem. Like, it's never just, oh, like, how are you type of thing. What's the issue? And reaching out proactively before there's a problem and making those connections is so helpful, I realize, because then when problems do occur, we're not alone. Like, we have people, as we talked about with the community, even in the company, who we can talk to and even just vent and be like, hey, like, I had a really tough situation. And that's why I encourage like proactive communication is just so important, especially in the STEM field, like what I talked about earlier, where a lot of people are very smart but don't have the communication skills.
And this is Wendy speaking. Thank you. We do want to acknowledge that we have 5 minutes left. You will be getting an email with a survey. However, there's also a link right here in the Q&A in the chat box with a link and also a QR code to a survey. If you'd like to take it, it just helps us to get more information and how we can improve the webinar for next year or feedback. At the same time, if you do have further questions or comments, I do want to apologize that we are not able to get to all these wonderful questions and comments. However, I did put my email in the chat box. It's wchuinard@helenkeller.org. If you'd like to send me an email with your question, and I can always forward that to the appropriate regional representative that covers your area and would be able to provide those answers. We have 4 minutes left. We do have quite a few more questions. Gus, did you want
let's do one more question, and we'll just do like a quick rapid fire answering, and then we'll close out the session, if that's okay. Let's just do one question, Wendy.
Sounds good. Well, we have one from Nathan Bullock, and he says, I aspire to be an AT instructor, though the options in my area are very limited. I applied for seasonal roles at Apple Store, but what are some of the strategies that I can use to interact with customers in environments that are noisy or that have background noise? And thank you again for this event.
This is Sarah. I don't know enough about the Apple Store, but I would assume that there might be some office space or some place where you can duck out for one. That would be something I would see about or ask about. Any other ideas?
This is Gus speaking. I got to be honest with you. I sometimes really struggle with loud spaces. As you know, walking through them and communicating with people and knowing who I'm speaking to, I often use my auditory, my listening skills to kind of determine who I'm talking to. Obviously, I ask when I'm not sure, but I don't know. I wish I had a solid answer for that. I do know there are there are definitely people within Apple that work in the stores with disabilities, with vision impairment. I even know somebody with dual sensory loss. I can't say that it's easy, and I can't say that it's been easy for that individual, for the individuals that I do know, but they have a level of determination to make it work because it's what they want, right? And that is what's giving them the drive, is like, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to make it work. And sometimes it does leave them with frustration. Sometimes it leaves them with a tremendous amount of like, wow, I made a change today. I made a difference here. So I think figuring out what's going to work for you the best is going to be important. One other thing that was mentioned is about like bothering people. Like, I want to speak to that really quickly. Like, we all have stuff that we're good at, and we all have stuff that we're not good at, whether we're sighted, not sighted, hearing, not hearing, and so on and so forth. We should never feel like we're bothering people. Like, if it's we're all in a space to do a job, right? Like, let's say I'm in my office right now at Helen Keller Services for the Blind. Everybody here is in the same, we're all working towards the same mission. So if I'm asking somebody for support, it's inside of that conversation. It's not inside of like, oh, help me, I'm helpless. No, I'm asking for support to complete a task so that we can fulfill on this shared mission or their shared vision, right? And vice versa. I have people that come to me all the time and ask me for support, and it's got nothing to do with me being blind or not being blind. It's just I have certain knowledge and certain experiences that are helpful to people. But I think people with disabilities are taught to feel burdensome, right? Or historically have felt that way. And that still unfortunately carries over. And I think, each individually, I think we need to do that work for ourselves to move ourselves out of that conversation that we're having alone and just kind of put it out there. There are going to be people that are going to be bothered by you requesting support and assistance. So what?
Yeah.
Ask for it anyway.
Agreed.
Right. I guess. Yeah, please go ahead.
Oh, I just real quick. This is
Yeah.
Aaron. I think it's a good coincidence that the Apple Store was the one that was mentioned. Later this year, AirPods Pro, which are the
Yes.
earphones made by Apple, are getting a software update. They're going to become over-the-counter hearing aids. So they will help with hearing environments. And what they will also do is when you're in a really noisy environment, it will tone down the noise and help you focus on who you're talking to. But there's a lot of great stuff coming out from Apple. So if there's anywhere to work that you're a little bit concerned about conversations with other people because of hearing loss, I think Apple's a pretty good choice.
Well, thank you,
yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
We could go on for a long time here, and as Wendy said, we will certainly answer the questions. I want to give a big thank you to Gus and Aaron and Chancey and Joe for all your input.
And Sarah.
And Sarah, sorry. All these individuals have either been through the HKSB, New York Community Service Program, the national program at Helen Keller National Center, or Gus and Joe are employees of the organization. And most of the individuals.
Chancey's not a service. She did not receive services from us, but she is.
Chancey is a great partner of us through various areas within HKSB and HKNC, and she's helping us to do some great work. So great shout out there also. So most of you who are on the call were from or are from the VR or blind services world, either as individuals who are experiencing, being blind, having low vision, or deaf blind. But there's so many from the different states. And we hope that the input and the advice and the direction that the panelists and Gus have shared make a difference for you in supporting the communities that you serve. We're open to other questions, input, and so on offline, and look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next year. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thank you to the panelists for sharing your lives and your experiences with us. Very, very important stuff. Thank you.